when people are in a state of confusion, there's always somebody who will come in and tell you how to do it. And I think you're alluding to that in some of the articles. People,
yes,
in essence, urging people to, well, just screw the boss, quiet. Right.
Welcome to the A Different Kind of Psychiatry podcast, brought to you by the ACO. I'm Dr. Chris Burritt. Each month, we feature a patient interview, case presentation, or interview or discussion with one or more of our doctors who practice a different kind of psychiatry. We are interested in your questions and comments, and I would love to hear your feedback. Send an email to aco@orgonomy.org. The best way to help the American College of Ergonomy spread its knowledge is by letting others know about us. If you enjoy the podcast, we'd appreciate you leaving a rating and review. If you're interested in attending one of our webinar presentations, you can meet the doctors and join in on the discussion afterwards. If you're interested in training with the ACO, you can learn more about the medical orgone therapy or social ergonomy training programs. You can connect with us and learn more at orgonomy.org or adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com. This episode features an interview with Dr. Peter Crist about the concept of quiet quitting. He describes to me how he sees it and in his characteristic way goes below the surface and gets to the heart of the problem. Dr. Crist, I'm very happy to be talking with you today. I've been seeing this idea of quiet quitting everywhere I look, and I immediately thought of you as the person to go to help me understand it, because I thought of the presentations you gave at the ACO before we were doing webinars. We were having the public come hear some presentations, and you gave, I think, 3 or 4 great ones about looking at work life. And it's interesting because I'm reading numerous newspaper articles and they keep talking about quiet quitting. And I actually am not seeing it with my patients, but with some acquaintances in my private life, I am hearing about it. And I'll give you one example. There's a young guy in finance, and he told me that because they can monitor if he's working from home, because they can monitor if you're active or not, he figured out that if he put something heavy on the space bar, then it looks like he's active. And so he can get away with doing something else.
Yeah.
So Dr. Crist, I'm really excited to hear how you're looking at quiet quitting.
So I'm glad that you alerted me to looking at it. I'd been hearing about it myself. A friend of mine mentioned it to me probably just in the last month, and I had not heard that term before. And in fact, after you asked me to look at this with you, I went back and looked it up, and it doesn't even appear in the dictionary, even the slang dictionary, before about July of this year. So I think before we even go farther with it, some people may not have even heard the term, others have heard it. I wasn't clear what people were referring to. So why don't we just start off defining it? So do you have a good definition we can use?
Yeah, there are lots of different definitions. So let me just pull up one article. This article is from the World Economic Forum website. It's by Victoria Masterson from September 2nd. What is quiet quitting? Quiet quitting is the art of not taking work too seriously, mostly used by Gen Z workers who have helped the term go viral on TikTok.
Yeah, that was my understanding is there was someone, and I think one of the articles you mentioned, there was a guy on TikTok who did a whole thing that just went absolutely viral.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull that up. So that's so there's an article in the Wall Street Journal on August 12th, and it references that TikTok. The title is, "If Your Coworkers Are Quiet Quitting, Here's What That Means." So this man, Zaid Khan, a 24-year-old engineer in New York, posted a quiet quitting video that racked up 3 million views in 2 weeks. He explained the concept this way: you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life.
Okay, so I mean, again, we're already into looking at both positive and negative aspects about it, and I hope that that's something we can really flesh out talking today. And do you have a sense of some other particular articles? Because I remember you mentioned several to me.
So one that was really striking to me was the Epoch Times has an article that references the Gallup poll, and it's the title is 50% of the American workforce are quiet quitters. Quiet quitters, employees who strictly stick to the job descriptions and do only the bare minimum required of their tasks, now make up the majority of the U.S. workforce, according to the latest Gallup survey. And not only that, it said 50%, but it actually mentioned that there was another 25% who were disengaged from their work. And it basically painted a picture that only 25 or 1/4 of the population is actively engaged and excited about their work.
Yeah. And to me, that's astounding and tragic, because and that's where we get to what I was mentioning, both the positive and negative sides. Is there's been a problem with people having work become drudgery and getting burnt out, being pushed too much. So there's something positive about, and it really came in, I think, with the millennials wanting to have meaning in their work. They were not willing to just do something because they were told, as a generation, more than the baby boom generation. And so, that's a positive side somehow, is there's a problem that we need to solve. But then the negative side is like people are trying to see what they can do to get away with as little as possible, which to me is, if you're spending more than at least 8 hours a day working, it's a major part of everybody's life. And to have that be just drudgery that'll let me see what I can get away with, to me is a tragic waste of people's lives. And again, I think we as ergonomists have a lot to offer in terms of looking at that question.
You're right, it is tragic. And I think what you also alluded to was, in these articles and commentary about quiet quitting, there's this heavy moralistic feeling about how people are looking at it.
Yes. Yeah. That struck me too. In some of the things I was looking at, you're either good if you're quiet quitting or bad if you're quiet quitting. And but it's as soon as you're into a moralistic approach, you're not just looking at what's going on, particularly what's going on emotionally. And to me, that's something that we need to absolutely find a way to address. So in what you've been reading, I've heard a number of things, but do you have a sense of why, from what you've read, why this has come up so pointedly right now?
So there's a lot of pointing to the pandemic, but the way I'm hearing it, it hasn't been stated exactly, but it feels like it's been festering, and then it kind of came to the surface, maybe because of the pandemic. But that reminds me, there's this wonderful article by Jeffrey Tucker from the Brownstone Institute from August 26th. Mm-hmm. And so his article is called "The Why of Quiet Quitting." And he says, the roots of quiet quitting precede lockdowns. Back then, there was a sudden focus on work-life balance. I will be just blunt. I despise the phrase. It's rooted in some strange Marxist supposition that life is somehow different from and completely at odds with work. Work then is rooted in some kind of alienation from life. Someone is forced by unjust and artificial institutions that probably deserve to be overthrown. So that reminded me of something you mentioned before. So tell me, how do you hear that article?
Well, when I did read that article, and it was one of those moments of, somebody has sort of validated or reinforced, come back to exactly how I look at things. And so you mentioned the talks that I gave in the social ergonomy presentation series about work, and we started those in February of 2013 with probably, I think, our best attended talk ever. And the title was, "Are you satisfied with your work life?" And that's really sparked a chord for people. We had a very, very good, productive discussion among the audience members at that talk. Then I did a series every year. The next one was, "Are you satisfied with your work relationships?" Then I did one on the next year on negotiating work politics. And then I happened to be out in Chicago. We were visiting my wife's family, and our nephew had just gotten a new job. And I thought, what would I do for the next one in February? And I said to him, I've been doing these talks about work, and what would you as a young person want to hear about? He said, well, everybody's talking about work-life balance. And I thought, okay, let me do one on that. And as soon as I sat down to talk about it, to start thinking about it, to get ready to do the presentation, I realized, wait a minute, work-life balance acts as if work isn't a part of life, exactly what Jeffrey Tucker was saying. And then I realized, going back to Reich's famous quotation, "Love, work, and knowledge are the wellsprings of our life. They should also govern it." I thought, well, love and work are really the two aspects of our life that we need to find a way to balance. And I think that's what people are troubled with. My work has taken over my whole life, so I don't have the rest of my life for my family, for my mate, other people that I want to just spend time with because I love them. And so I thought, okay, I'll do a talk on work-love balance. And I started putting together some slides, and it was like this balancing beam of love and work. And I said, wait a minute, that's, if you have too much work over here, that means you got to reduce the work in order to get a balance. Well, I have found that it seems like if your work life is going really well, it can support your love life. And if your love life is going well, that actually supports and makes work much more satisfying. So even though it was too late to change the title of my talk, I realized what it's really about is work-love integration. How well do those two aspects of our life really function together? And so in the process of looking at that and work problems, what I've really has gotten clear to me is the problem is people have lost contact with their joy at work. And I ran across a book by Dennis Bakke by that title, and it's probably one of the best books people could read about how to find some way to be sure that you have passion in your work. And, so we'll get into more of that. I think is going to be very important to look at what has happened. That people have so much trouble maintaining excitement in their work. Yeah.
Do you have, from the patients you're working with, do you have any patients who are struggling with that now, or?
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of people. Fortunately, somehow my practice developed in a way that many of the people I work with are either creative types or independent business people doing something that they really love. And in fact, looking at that article on World Economic Forum that defined quiet quitting, they had a reference, a term that again was something new, but I had not seen it before. The future of work is the passion economy. And I thought, oh, okay. They're actually talking about what we're talking about, that it's possible for people to have passion about what they're doing. And interestingly, it seems both the millennials and the Gen Z members, as much as people want to disparage them, oh, they have no work ethic, they are far more interested in, I want to do something meaningful. I want to do something that matters to me and makes a difference. And that's an absolutely
That's not a problem.
It's not a problem. To me, that's what we need to be working towards. So this idea that there's some new phenomenon of quiet quitting is also interesting. It's like people come up with something, but this is really nothing new. And looking at it, one of the articles mentioned Herman Melville's book that was published in a story that was published in 1853. I think it's called Bartleby Scribner, A Story of Wall Street, about a lawyer who hires a new clerk. And that clerk is very excited about doing the work he's assigned. And then at some point, the lawyer assigns him not just to do the clerking work, but to do proofreading. And the Bartleby responds, "I'd prefer not to." And that then becomes what the whole story is about, is that consistently, so in 1853, here we had a Wall Street clerk quiet quitting. He stayed on the job, and his boss could not get rid of him because he, was still there. I mean, it's a very interesting story about how personal and work boundaries got all mixed up. So the idea this is a brand new phenomenon is important to underscore. It's really nothing new. It's a new name that people are putting to it.
It does also make me think of, I have an older patient, he's about 73, and talking about his work now that he's retired, there was a strong aspect of duty in him that I think even if he had the impulse to quiet quit, overrode it. And that seems to be some change in the generations where maybe they had those impulses to find something, but they had some difficulty in being able to find their passion. And so they kind of just put their head down and grinded it out.
Yeah. Because my wife has been in the acting field. There's so many people I've gotten to know as actors that the standard line is, well, I do my acting, but I have my day job. And so that's, again, nothing new. Creative people have often felt like, well, I got to do something for money. I'm blanking on his name, a famous educator who gave a talk back in a graduation talk decades ago. And he spelled it out to me very nicely. He said, there are jobs, careers, and work. He said, a job is what you do for money. A career is a series of such jobs, but work is what you would do whether you were paid for it or not. It's your work. And the ideal thing is to find a way to be paid for your work. So that concept, I think underscores a lot of what this whole controversy is about.
Yeah. And one thing I also don't want to overlook is that some of the articles really seem to maybe take someone reading the article who may be lacking satisfaction in their work, and it really seems like, egging them on to screw the boss. Have you felt that? Have you read that?
Yes, I certainly felt that from the tone of the article. So I think you've now touched on one of the crucial things is, as doctors, we were taught, whether most doctors consistently do it or not, we're taught identify the problem before you make a solution or come up with a solution. So diagnose before you treat as doctors. And here is a problem, and it's like somebody has come up with the treatment for it, which is quiet quitting, rather than digging into, but what is this basic problem? And I really think it comes back to the difficulty people have in staying with their emotional excitement and their passion. And I think one of the things we have to offer as ergonomists is the understanding that these things really go back to what we call armoring, the people's inability to tolerate their own emotions. And if you look at Dr. Baker's book, Man in the Trap, his chapter on armoring, if you look at the origin of armoring, he refers to Reich's analysis of it in The Murder of Christ, but Baker goes into it in detail. The story of Genesis is really the story of the development of armor and people's loss of contact with their own internal Eden, their own natural capacity for pleasure. And
the capacity, the work to love.
So all the things that Reich referred to, love, work, and knowledge, so the natural capacity to just find pleasure in those. And I put together, I dug out the quote from the Bible, because I don't know, that bit, the Genesis story, people consistently look at that as the loss of connection and the development of sexual shame, and the focus is on the sexuality. But right in Genesis, there's more written about the effect on Adam in terms of work than on Eve in terms of her
Really?
life. Yes. So I'm going to quote the Bible here. So this is the King James Version, and this is after. So this is God talking to Adam, and he says, "And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herbs of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return." Now, if that isn't a story of work becoming drudgery instead of just living naturally without some separation between love and work, I don't know what that story is about. But, so wow. To me, our problem is exactly that. And you said one of the I've had a number of patients in therapy long enough, so I've now had a number of people who had productive lives and who then decided to retire. And that's an area, people talked about that for a long time, but that's an area where people go from the earlier generations. As you said, there's a tendency for people to do things out of duty, and we can talk about that some. I think one of the key things that needs to be mentioned here is there's been that major transformation in our society from authoritarian to anti-authoritarian. And the authoritarian tendency was an authority tells you what to do, you do it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And that has broken down really starting in the early 50s, but really peaking by the 60s, the anti-authoritarian attitude. So part of what I think we're reaping now are the effects of longer term aspects of that. And there are people who decry, we should go back to the good old days, at work ethic.
As if everything was perfect back then. Right?
Everything was perfect then. We know it wasn't. And you can't go backwards. We can only go forward. And to me, that's actually one of the hopes that we have to offer, is going forward in a way where we can now say, okay, what do you really want to be doing? And the three layers of people's emotional structure that I've put the names nature that we're born with, the character that we develop, and the personality, the facade we present to the world, apply not just in terms of our love lives, but they apply in terms of our work lives. So I do a lot of work with people on trying to identify what is your work nature. So this one guy who was a college professor, had retired, and he was struggling with, what did he want to be doing? And what we were able to bring out is that one of his basic things that brought him satisfaction, no matter what he did, was seeing the development of someone's ability to learn. So he actually started writing a book and looking at the research on how people learn. And I said, where else does that apply besides as a professor? And he realized, well, he's also an avid bird watcher, and getting together with other birders, just helping them learn how to learn about birds. He was using that basic natural aspect of his work nature.
Oh, wow.
One of the things that I'm sensing is coming out of this whole problem that the way Jeffrey Tucker put it in that article, quiet quitting didn't start with the pandemic, but I do believe the pandemic really intensified all kinds of aspects in everybody's life, both in our love lives and our work lives. That all kinds of things have come to a head just recently.
Yes.
So
if someone's not in their own therapy, if someone's, finds themselves that they're looking at, am I quiet quitting? Am I, withdrawing? Am I struggling with this? I'm curious what you might say to them, or what you might leave with them, to how to look at it for themselves or their family members.
Yeah. One of the basic things that we're always looking at is life is actually a natural, spontaneous process, and our understanding of what work is. I think I'm not aware of any other discipline that really understands it. I think the simplest way I would define it is that work is a natural, spontaneous biological function, and to understand that people need to work, and the way I imagine that is it's in every biological aspect. Every time sap moves up a tree, it's moving something forward. And I go back to the physics definition of work is force times distance. So every time something moves forward, work is being done. Every time a baby finally stands up or is able to crawl across the room, they're doing work.
Yeah.
Do they do that with pleasure? Do they do that, as a baby? They still are in contact with that natural joy.
They just work.
They just work without having to think about it. So that's reminded me of a story that I might want to read that came up in my memoir story. But before we see if I do that. What you said is, what would I say to people? And to me, there are two really, really important aspects of all of this. One is that understanding you need to work. And if you don't work, your energy literally is going to become static, and you're going to develop what we call stasis, where the energy gets stale and backs up, and you don't feel good. So I tell people you need to find something to keep yourself moving, to get moving forward. And to me, that's one of the serious problems with what happened during the pandemic, where people literally were paid for not working. And what happened to their work energy? It had to build up in stasis.
Right.
I think it's probably not accidental that there were riots and violent demonstrations that occurred when people were locked down and didn't have a natural outlet for their work energy. So again, how I would diagnose the problem is that people have lost contact with their natural, spontaneous impulse to work, out of joy to work productively. And so people can either withdraw and not act on that and quiet quit, or they can find something that they're passionate about. And the problem is if people are pushing themselves in a drudgery kind of way, they will burn out, because if you're doing something that comes spontaneously out of you, out of passion, you don't get burnt out.
Which interestingly is what we were talking about before quiet quitting became the thing. Burnout was big in the news.
Yes. So to me, there are the two sides of this phenomenon of, well, there's the negative side. Well, people are just quiet quitting. That people get moralistic about that side. The other side is people are moralistic. Well, how dare the boss tell me what to do when it's not what I want to do. And again, every time there's that kind of confusion, if you don't separate out what is rational in this action. So what's rational about quiet quitting? What's rational about not quiet quitting? You're opening the door to people coming in to try to take control, to manage things, what we call the emotional plague, the destructive reactions in human life. And I think that's very important to underscore, is when people are in a state of confusion, there's always somebody who will come in and tell you how to do it. And I think you're alluding to that in some of the articles, people, in essence, urging people to, well, just screw the boss, quiet quit.
Yeah. So you mentioned a story from your memoir. I'm curious to hear about that.
Okay, I would be glad to read that, because I think it may also just underscore and lead us into a bit more discussion about it. So the title is Murder in the Sandbox. When my daughter was 2 years old, I took her to the park. A number of kids were playing in the sandbox with parents hanging out around the edge. While Tara walked along the edge of the sandbox, one little boy was building a pile of sand, not elaborate enough to call a castle yet. He made at least a dozen trips to retrieve sand that, for some reason unclear to me, he liked better than the sand near where he'd started his pile. He beamed as he carried spoonful after spoonful while he danced across the sandbox. I watched the boy's pile grow bit by bit. On one of his trips back to his source of sand, he pointed his spoon to a man reading a book. "See, Daddy, I'm building a special sandcastle." The father looked up. "I can see. You found some special sand over here that you really like." The boy nodded as he squatted to dig up another spoonful. The father handed him a plastic bucket that had been lying in plain sight the whole time while the boy mined his preferred sand. "Here, Evan, use this. It'll be more efficient." Evan looked puzzled, but eased the bucket down by the little hole he'd been excavating and began shoveling sand into it with his spoon. The father said, "Here, I'll help you." He picked up the toy shovel. "Let me show you how to use this. It'll be much quicker." Soon the father had filled the bucket, which he handed to his son. "Now you can get much more of your special sand to the other side and build a really big castle." With a look of determination and no trace of the earlier dance in his step, Evan lugged the bucket of sand across the sandbox and dumped it near his castle to be. His father said, "See, isn't that much quicker?" Evan gave a few perfunctory pats to shape the pile of sand that now dwarfed his earlier castle. Then he jumped up and ran for the swings.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you call it Murder in the Sandbox.
Yeah.
It's hearing that is exciting because I can picture this little boy just having a wonderful time. And yet it's sad to hear that not only did the father already start adding in this idea of efficiency and productivity, but what really stands out is I don't think he had any clue what was going on.
Yeah, that was absolutely clear to me at the time. And so to me, this story it hit me at the time. And then when I came back to it and wrote it, I realized, my God, that is really the story of what happens to so many of us in our work lives. That it shows that work is a natural, spontaneous process. This kid, just doing it out of joy, and that we're born with that natural joy in work, and that the natural impulse to have joy in our work gets disturbed when someone else compels us to work, tells us how to do it, or does it for us. And I think that part needs to be underscored. And also just the understanding that, as I said, you were saying, attempts at efficiency can actually interfere with productivity. And that when work becomes drudgery, we lose our natural joy in it. And I think the point you were making, bosses with the best of intentions can undermine their workers' joy in their employees' work.
Yeah.
To me, again, as I said, the problem is that the problem in human life that goes back all the way to probably the beginning of civilization, as the Genesis story tells us, that there gets to be a disconnect between our natural functions of love, work, and knowledge and our pleasure in them.
Yeah.
And anything that we can do to help people see that as a problem and see that it doesn't have to be that way. And I actually, to me, that's some of what's encouraging reading, that concept of passion economy. That's exactly what they're talking about. They're saying more Gen Z people. One of the things in that article was fascinating to me, that they said the highest aspiration, most frequent response to a survey about what people aspired to do was YouTuber.
Huh.
More than being a movie star.
Wow.
And I realized, so that's an example of people potentially doing something very constructive. I have a 14-year-old kid who's diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and he's actually really quite brilliant. And just this last Friday, he had told me that a couple weeks ago, well, I started doing videos. I started a YouTube channel. This last Friday, in his funny way that he has, he said, I have 500 subscribers on my YouTube channel. All the kids at work want me to make YouTubes. All the kids at school want me to make YouTubes of them. So here's this presumably very troubled kid. I mean, yes, he has his problems, but he has found something that he's now passionate about that helps him get out of his introversion, helps him with other people. And he said, yeah, I got a tripod. And he picked up and showed me on the video the tripod he'd gotten, so I can make them look much more professional. He said, let me show you. And he hooked his phone that he was using for the video session with me up to it, set it down, and it was absolutely still against the gray background of the wall of his bedroom. And I said, it looks absolutely professional. The lighting is perfect. He said, well, that's just natural light. And I said, no, you got it. You know exactly how to make them look.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So that's just a little example, I think, of as I said, people tend to decry the changes of how horrible things are, but I'm a born optimist. I can't help it. I really do see, if we can continue to work to make people aware of the destructive tendencies that interfere, the natural tendency for life is going to come forward. And
well, what I'm hearing, Dr. Crist, is you saying for someone listening, maybe just taking a fresh look at their work situation and seeing what is getting in the way, and maybe that.
Yes. Yeah. To me, that's if we understand life and work as something spontaneous, we don't have to make anything happen. we really have to see what we can do to remove the logs in the logjam. So just somebody becoming aware of, something's in the way here. And I've found that, very useful with many of that. When people ask me, what should I do when I retire? It's some form of that same response of what's in the way of you being clear.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Crist, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate this time to hear how you're looking at it, and I'm sure the audience does too. Anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but there's just so much in this whole topic. So I really appreciate you asking me to talk about it. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but I think that's good for now, just to make people aware of it, that there's another way to look at these things. It's not quiet quitting is good, quiet quitting is bad. It's not a moral question. It's what's really going on under the surface with people's work lives.
Thank you, Dr. Crist.
You're welcome. Thank you.
How do you feel after listening to this interview? What do you think? I sincerely hope that people who are struggling with their work lives are able to take a step back and look at the situation and find something that works for them, without becoming moralistic or destructive. I hope they're able to identify what's ever blocking their satisfaction, whether in themselves or their current situation, and move forward. We are interested in your questions and comments, and I would love to hear your feedback. Send an email to aco@orgonomy.org. If you learned something or enjoyed the podcast, I hope you'll consider leaving a rating and review. The best way to help the ACO spread its knowledge is by letting others know about us. I hope you share this podcast with your friends and family and let them know about our work. You can connect with us at orgonomy.org or adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com. I'm Dr. Chris Burritt. Thank you for listening to the A Different Kind of Psychiatry podcast, brought to you by the ACO. Since 1968, the psychiatrists affiliated with the American College of Ergonomy have been helping patients discover greater satisfaction, health, and overall well-being in their lives. Whether patients suffer with mental illness, struggle with addiction, or feel unsatisfied with their work lives or relationships, medical orgone therapy, as practiced by the physicians at the ACO, offers a way forward, often without the use of medication.